Okay, welcome back. I'm gonna log into the SCCM server and do the first time configuration. Okay, this is where we left. So let's close and reopen everything as a scratch. So do you know that how to open the console also now? So simple. Go to the and click on System Center and open up Configuration Manager console. This opens the SCCM console. Okay, now we're going to do the first time for the fast configuration. So this might take maybe a 5 to 10 minutes of this session just to explain how to configure and what to configure, and so that you can easily configure post to this. Okay, so what we have done as of we have actually installed in our infrastructure. Say example, this is your company infrastructure and you have a lot of servers and Windows 10 or maybe Windows 7 or some other machines, right? So all of users or devices, whatever you have here inside this, you also have one server now called SCCM server, right? So in this SCCM server, what you have done is you install the SCCM uh, and you're going to configure. So to configure anything, the steps are involved in this way. The first thing is we have to tell to the SCCM server, hey, you're going to manage only to this office. Say maybe if this is a Redmond office, okay, you're gonna point to only to this office. Do not manage outside of your offices. Say example, you may have other branch offices. Whether you want to manage or don't want to manage, it is all up to you, and how you're gonna configure or how you're gonna uh, tell to your SCCM server is the key. So this is nothing but your called the first step. Okay, this is nothing but your boundary, right? So you're saying that within this boundary, okay, within this line, okay, this is within this boundary lines, you can work or you can serve for your SCCM clients. Say example, there's a client here in other office, branch office, and if he's trying to communicate or trying to get the inputs or maybe content or maybe some kind of activity is going to happen, you can simply drop that activity by configuring boundaries. Okay, so the first step would be the boundary, right? So let's have a look on the boundaries, how it looks like. As I said earlier in the previous lecture, anything to be configuration part, okay, the first time configuration, you must have to go to administration tab. So in this navigation, in the administration, especially we call it as in fact the workspace. These are the 4 different workspaces. You can customize them in this workspace, and this is into the navigation. Okay, point to site hierarchy. Under this, you have the first time configurations. If you can see here, boundaries are listed here, and there are no boundaries. That means this server is not designed or not ready to serve for any of the clients. Okay, so to do the configuration for the first time, what you have to do is you have to configure boundaries. Okay, so to do that, if I right click here, I have an option for lot of options. I have here almost close to 4. One would be the IP subnet. That means if you know the subnet mask, for example, you have 10 series example, you can give this with the subnet ID. Okay, so this way it's knows that, hey, I'm gonna manage within this 10 series all the clients. So it's a huge, in fact, 255 into 255 into 255 is a huge count, right? Now for another option would be Active Directory site. What happens is if you browse, okay, it will list the sites. Okay, so the first default site would be Active Directory. In the Active Directory, default hyphen first hyphen site name. Okay, now I may have to explain a little bit, if you are not Active Directory guy, a little bit about the sites and services. Let me go back to the Active Directory. So this is Active Directory server, right? And I'll close these previously open all the windows, and simply I'll go to the administrative tools, and if I go here, I have Active Directory sites and services. What exactly is site? Site represents the number of permissions which are available in that specific office. Okay, let me show you here. Okay, by drawing, I'm talking about Active Directory. This is nothing related to the SCCM. I'm talking about purely Active Directory. Say, example, you have a location called Redmond. In this Redmond, you may have one domain controller. Okay, so this domain controller used to authenticate for the clients. So if a client wants to authenticate or want to log in, it will give the required tokens and it will log in, right? And if you configure some of the group policies, okay, that policies gets applied here on all those machines, right, with the help of domain controller. Now let's take another office, maybe a branch office. There also you might have a different computers. So to authenticate these, if you have a local RODC, okay, or maybe read-only domain controller or additional domain controller, whatever it is, okay, if that is available, it will authenticate from here. Otherwise, what happens is these machines have to travel over the WAN, okay, for any kind of authentication to the nearest one. Okay, so to restrict this kind of behavior, instead of going over the WAN, okay, we have to say, hey, you have to go and authenticate within this, okay, within this branch office, RODC or maybe ADC, or in this case, you just go and authenticate with the primary domain controller. To tell this, we need to do a configuration, like to find out all of these machines existency. What we do is we should know as an Active Directory administrator all this subnet information. What is a subnet? A subnet will contain all the machines IP addresses, right? Say example, if it starts from 1 to maybe a 255, between whatever the 255 machines, all of them are part of this office. So we know that if any new machines coming, and if they or maybe created 172 series, okay, 172.16 dot maybe 0.5 of the machine name they have given. So if this machine is part of already in this location, if it is trying to authenticate, okay, if this specific subnet is not associated within the sites and services, like in this case, if it is the default first hyphen site name, okay, in this site, what happens is the Active Directory admin will take the subnet information, he will add here under this subnets. Okay, so once he has added here the subnet, okay, within that subnet all the machines are allowed to log in, so the proper group policies would apply and there will not be any problems related to the authentication or maybe a delay. Okay, so that's called the Active Directory site. So what happens is, in the practically, if you are the first time looking at this kind of configuration or Active Directory sites and services side, any company, wherever they have the branch offices, each branch office, we call it as a site represents the physical topology or physical location most of the time. So all these physical locations, what would happen is they would establish some kind of link within this. You can see here maybe the linking intra-site transmission related, so the replication would happen. So if a user gets created here in this DC, it gets replicated to here, so that the user can access within this resources or this resources also. So all this would happen for the replications and all other activities. But in our case, what we are looking is, we are looking for a already Active Directory admin must have already created different sites, and also he might have already associated for each site some of these subnets. So these subnet information might be Active Directory admin might be getting it from network team, and once a network team is given the subnets, that might be a valid subnet. So these subnets would add to your sites. Okay, let's create few of the sites and the subnets, so that what I'm trying to explain to you would make sense to you. Okay, give me a second, let me pause recording. Let's create here site. Okay, if I create a new site, example maybe BLR, okay, and the replication one is a default one, okay, and then this is a site. What happens if for example, this is, I'm gonna rename as, okay, as Redbund. Okay, in this what happens is, you have a Active Directory domain controller. Okay, this domain controller, whatever the missions are associated within that region, that should get authenticated with this domain controller and process that required group policies. To do that, what I have to do is I have to go to the subnets. Inside subnets, I have to create a new subnet. Okay, I'm sure that I know it 192.168.31.0, which I have within my subnet. How would I know? Let's go to the your client machine, any of the machine, and check for this. Okay, ipconfig. So ipconfig is very clear that the first three here, whatever you have the 255 or the last subnet, which is 888, that means 255 indicates the 8 into 8 into 8, which is 24 830. So you give this till 31 slash 24. Okay, that's what I've given here, slash 24 I'm going to give now. Okay, and this is associated with Redmond location. So what happens is this is how Active Directory admin would create. Okay, similarly there might be another subnet, example 10 series. Okay, maybe slash 8 example. So this is associated with BLR location. Okay, and now if I this is how would be done by your Active Directory admin with the help of network team. Let's have a look on it in the practically in the Google to show some of the real world sites, how it looks like in the some others consoles. Let's open browser and type AD sites and services and just click on the images. You would see here this is one of the site. For example, here subnet A, subnet B has associated with the two subnets, right? Similarly, if you look at here, Bangalore subnet has here associated with this 192.168.100.128 by 25. Like this, you have multiple subnets. See, in this case, this guy has a lot of other subnets. Okay, these are remote subnets and different headquarters, GBS or Oslo. Okay, like that, you might have different subnets in the production. Okay, so when you have such situation, what you have to do is you must be aware that you are trying to associate with this SCCM server with the required subnet. Okay, let's go back to the actual configuration, what we are trying to do on SCCM server. Now we have configured properly at least Redmond site and the Bangalore site. In fact, the Bangalore is a dummy one. There is no other configuration is configured at this point of time. Let's go to the CMC01, and now I'll just cancel this once again and rebrowse. Let's go to the boundaries and right click new boundary. This time I'm going to choose as the Active Directory site. Before that, I also have the IP address range. If I know that IP address range, for example 192.168.31.0 to I want to cover only 192.168.31 dot, maybe just the till 100. Okay, that is from 1 to 100 machines only I want to cover. Then I can give this boundary. Okay, but anyway, I have already covered the Active Directory site, as it's recommended to configure from the Active Directory site. It's not you can configure the way you want it, but it's all comes to the recommendations. If you have Active Directory, use that so that you're not gonna miss any clients without the boundaries, because Active Directory team actively works on any of the new subnets inclusion would automatically they take the responsibility and they add it to Active Directory sites and services. Now we're going to just use that. Okay, browse. Now I should list here two of them, yeah, Redmond and Bangalore. Now I'm going to choose as Redmond, and I can give as this description for my Redmond location. Okay, and now if you look at here, the boundary groups are not there anything. Okay, I'm going to talk in a minute about the boundary groups. Let's click on OK for now. Okay, what exactly the boundaries and the boundaries groups? Okay, let me take back to the boundary groups here, and if you look at here, by default one group got created which is called default site boundary group. Okay, let's create one more. Okay, and you would understand why we are going to create this. So if you give a name, like I'm gonna give this as for my primary site example. Okay, in this call, in this I'm gonna associate some of the boundaries. So boundaries are associated with at least one of the boundary group. Okay, you must have to associate. So in this case, we just created the boundary as Redmond, and we must have to associate, as I said, to one of the boundary group. Now I'm assigning. But I've not talked about why we have to um, associate one of the boundary group. Okay, that's I'm going to talk in this tab. Okay, by associating, you can get within that boundary. For that machines, a site code can be granted. That means, as I said earlier, also clients always communicates with a site code, right? So to get that site code, okay, to this Redmond boundaries, you need to take this checkbox so that it gets the site code. Okay, as the site code gonna assign as LAB. Okay, and now other one would be the next. What are the SCCM servers you're gonna give it for policy as well as for the content to be downloaded? Okay, when I say policy and the content, let's draw this. Okay, within this your Redmond office, okay, any of the client is trying to communicate with SCCM server, it definitely needs one site code. So in this case, this SCCM site has installed with the site code as LAB, right? So this LAB site has to be automatically given to the clients. Okay, so to get that site code information, which we published in the Active Directory, you remember that we've published under Systems Management Console. Let me you remember, right, in Active Directory Systems Management Container, and we extended the schema there, it has published, right? So there it will be assigned this lab site code would appearing there. So the clients will query to there, and it will validate their subnet information. So if this subnet is found in this boundary, it will check for the boundary group. So this is a boundary group, definitely in this case. So this boundary will, on the group, it will check for this checkbox, whether this checkbox is available to get this site code, and it gets that site code. The next one would be the content. Okay, so within this office, you are distributing some package, some software to the clients. So these clients are requesting some kind of policy to the SCCM server, or to download the required software and then get it installed, right? To install that, you need something called a schedule, right? So that schedule information, that is nothing but a policy. Okay, that contains a policy. So what to be done at what time would be written in the policy file. So that policy to be downloading from which server, you have to tell here by adding. Okay, similarly, once you have tell that, okay, the content to be downloaded, right? So content is available, the software packages are available here, and so the content can be downloaded from that site. So that's what this configuration, so that is exactly the boundary group. Boundary groups are very useful for the content and the site assignment process. Say example, you have a client and which is not getting a site code, then that means this machine's subnet or the IP address range is not associated with any of the boundaries, or if it is a boundary is already available, this boundary is not associated with any of the boundary group. If it is associated with the boundary group also, in that boundary group there might not be the DP or your SCCM server information was not added in this, or maybe the checkbox is not there here. Okay, these are the possible problems. Let's close this drawing and go back to the console, and now I'm gonna click on that. Now you know that it's gonna show me here this side. Okay, why this is only showing, let me open why it is only showing. So if you look at here under roles, if you just go to here, I'm sorry, I can't go without the closing this. So let me open one more console, which is not a good practice but can work. So this is one more time we are opening the another process of SCCM console. Let's go to the hierarchy management. So this is where we are trying to add the boundary groups, right? And boundaries group we are adding. Now I'm gonna go to the site configuration. Here I wanted to show something to you. Why in the first console we are trying to add this boundary group, for this boundary group as a content server as only visible as this. Why? The reason is, if you look at here under sites, we enabled the roles, management point and the DP for for open for installed, in fact the distribution point role as well as the management point role installed on this server, right? So that's why it is only showing here as that server name. So I'll just pick up that and click on apply. This would actually now a boundary got created as well as a boundary group has created. Let's go back to the boundary group. Okay, you have boundary and the member of the boundaries are 1. Okay, and the system count is 1. Okay, now if you look at here in the boundaries also, it will show as the count as 1 in the boundary group. Okay, so you can easily find out if you have already boundaries, and if it is showing as 0 in your production server, that means they might not be it might not be associated with any of the boundary group. So that means those machines might have a problem with the content downloading or maybe getting a policy information. Okay, let's move to the next configuration. So far what we have done, so far we have configured, we install a SCCM server here in our head office example. Maybe this is head office, and we told that, hey, you are gonna responsible within this boundary. So what is our boundary? Boundary name is Redmond, and this is associated with Active Directory site. So within this site that is in Active Directory by AD admin, what they have done, they have associated with Redmond with the Redmond site with some subnets, right? So within that subnet information was there. So what SCCM is doing is SCCM will use that Active Directory site. In the background it is also using the subnet information. So within that subnet, whatever the machines are there, say example here what we have done in this session 192, 168 and 31 series, what we have used by class 24. Within that series, any of the machine is available, it will treat that as the SCCM client, and it can give the content because we have configured in the boundaries groups to get the site code information as well as the content and the policy information. This is what we have done, but is not really enough, because to this SCCM server, okay, we should know what all the machines you have. You might have Windows 7, Windows XP, or maybe a damn printer, or maybe a Linux server, or maybe some other device, right? So all these information should know to a SCCM server. Otherwise you're going to manage to whom, right? So to know to the SCCM server, that means it has to find the machines. Maybe in another word would be, the right word would be the, instead of using the find, you can say that discover. You should be able to discover within here whatever the machines are available as machines, right? So it's going to do the discovery process. So it has to configure, or we have to configure the discovery process. So that's the next step which I'm going to talk. Okay, so the first step would be the boundary groups or the boundaries, and we set it to SCCM server the boundary. Now the next step would be the configuring the discovery, so which we are going to do it now. If you look at here, you have here discovery methods. If you remember, when the my PPT, let me open that. In the PPT under vocabulary section, I also talked about a little bit of the discovery. A discovery is a process which will find what are the objects are available in the SCCM server. So in this discovery, this is a different process, or different methods might be there. So I try to explain you during that time, like you can find out the users and the computers, maybe a security groups, or maybe you need to find out the network devices, right? So these things can be found in a discovery, but there is a different different options under discovery. Okay, let's go to the discovery, and this is called discovery methods, right? So under discovery methods, you have something called Active Directory users discovery. That means it will only find out the user objects. And there's something called system discovery. System discovery will discover the Active Directory computers. If you look at here, Active Directory, Active Directory, Active Directory is coming up on for all of these 4 of them. That means these methods are supported if you have Active Directory only, but most of the time 99% SCCM will be gets installed in an Active Directory environment, so that's fine. Okay, you can find the users as well as the systems and groups, security groups. So it can be a computer groups or user groups, right? And there's something called now the three of them were left over. Let's talk about the heartbeat discovery as a first time. Heartbeat discovery is a key, and as its name states, that heartbeat, you can't disable this. Okay, you can't disable. If you disable it, your entire health of a system goes down. Okay, don't play with this heartbeat discovery. And let me open up this as a first time and show you. By default, this gets configured for 7 days, which is 1 week, right? So what happens is, if a machine is found within the network, it will check for whether that machine is sending a heartbeat. A heartbeat is like, hey, I'm alive. Okay, that kind of configuration to tell to SCCM server, it has to report within a week at least once. Okay, that's called heartbeat discovery. You can increase this, but don't do that. Okay, this is a best practice and recommended configuration by Microsoft to configure for 7 days, that is 1 week here. And the next one would be the network discovery. What if you don't have Active Directory? Then you would be configuring discovery, which is purely on a network based. Like you can configure subnet information based, or domain based, or SNMP protocol based, or SNMP devices based, or DHCP scope options. So all these are options you have here, but we are not going to use the network discovery at this point of time. Okay, and we're going to choose the next option would be the users discovery. Before we go and enable this Active Directory user discovery, let's focus on how to get the log file names properly. Okay, since I know the log file, I can simply go to the logs, but I can find out easily. But how you would find out the logs? Okay, so normally, if you remember, the SCCM server got installed in D drive under program files. Let's open this program files under configuration manager. You have a folder called logs, so just open that logs folder. You have all the logs. Remember that I was talking in one of the session, there are close to 71 components which are under monitoring and the component status, but here it's showing as 65. So it's a close, my apologies, maybe it is 65 to 70 plus different components will be available, and for each of them a specific log gets created under logs folder. In the logs you have 78, because some of them will be overwritten. For example, SMS provider log, here it has been renamed as LO underscore. That means the history of this is the latest one, and this is a history one. Similarly, that might be there, otherwise it would be close to 70 plus. Okay, anyway, and coming back to the learning side, how would you easily learn is, you can simply open the troubleshooting one. For the troubleshooting, what you can do is you can start a computer management, that's a configuration manager, service manager, which is another window which will open up here. Here all the components will appear very similar to this components, okay, here, but it is showing as a green or yellow based on the inside log which is writing this information. So now all this are available here. Okay, if you look at here, the config mgr update SMS AI manager, so it's a very similar one. So if it is showing here 65, this also shows 65 here. So all of them will be available here. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are going to learn about the logs, but for most of them the logs will be appearing here. Okay, from here, if you look at here, the SMS provider example, if I go to the logging option, I can see here the log was not enabled. That's wrong. In fact, it's a service, so by default it will enable. But if you just open up any other logs, so this is a log file which is offline servicing manager.log file, which is located in this folder. So that's a folder which we are talking about this, right? By default, SMS provider would automatically opens this one, it will be there. Okay, even you can enable the log. Okay, and this log will be available here, SMS proof. This is the same log file which we have talked earlier also. SMS provider is a key, and whatever the actions you are performing on the SCCM console, that are getting automatically recorded here, okay, with the help of WMI. Now let's go back to the actual topic. The topic was when I configure here, okay, anything, what is a log file? It gets generated. So easy to remember. The easy to remember is go to the logs, okay, go to the logs, and you can fill with the timestamp at this point of time. Time is 8:49. So let's configure, and you see here what will happen. So to configure the discovery, enable here and browse. So this is where it's gonna pull all the users. So this is the users one, so I have all the users here. For example, I'll simply browse and say that, hey, I have all the users are available here, okay, and then I'll say click on OK. Okay, so what happens is this would be no searching recursively within that child objects also, if you take this option, okay. And then if you want to run this process instead of the SCCM account, and you want to do it with a separate Active Directory account, you can do that, but you can run with the site servers account also. Click OK. So this is where it's gonna binding with this path, okay. If you remember, this is a path very similar with it, which is showing in ADSI edit, right? And coming to the polling schedule, polling means when I have to go into this container or to this path and get the information. So I'm gonna get it every 5 minutes if a new object gets created. That's called delta, okay. But for the first time I'm gonna do it every 7 days. That's a full inventory or full polling would happen on in 7 days at least once, okay. And it started from old past date, in fact, okay. So this is the best practices. At least you can configure as 1 hour or maybe 15 minutes, or it's up to you. But think that you have a huge count of user objects. Say example, you have 100,000 user objects, and think about it. To run that entire 100,000 objects, delta would take definitely some time. So make sure that you should give enough time based on your comfort level on how much time it is taking. So I recommend, if it is 100,000, you can give as a 4 hours or 2 hours time, every 2 hours as the delta. So that within that time it goes and fetches data, and the component gets stabilized, and then again the time triggers for the delta. It gets the rediscovers as a delta, okay. And if you're trying to get some other information of that user specific objects information, you can filter here. Hey, I want to know additional information, when was created also. It is pulling up, but I also want some of the path. For example, easy to remember would be the, is it recycled employee type, you want to also to be pulled out. You can add it so that it will pull that information also, okay. So are you gonna when you click on apply, it says that, do you want to run now as soon as possible? Yes. Then you click monitor here. You're gonna say here, if I refresh, there is another log gets created with the name of ADSI. Let's see. So in the background it has started this process. Now you look at here, ADUSR user discovery.log file. The full name would be Active Directory user discovery.log file. If I open up this, you see here the log was trying to open, running. It is checking for this path and whether this path exists or not. Is it is exist, so it is starting the discovery, and it is again binding to this path to this SCCM server. And then when it is queried successfully, it found all these information, and finally it will say that, hey, I have total objects found. If it is found any of the object, it will come up. So if you look at here, the optional one of the object has found as one object, because we have only one user account within that path. Let's go and check it. What we have in our Active Directory users and computers. In that path, it should be only one user account, right? We have configured this. If you see, all of them got disabled, this or user account, and remaining or type. If you sort based on the type, there are only 3 users. Out of the 2 got disable mode. One is the active, which is enabled, which is administrator. So we can see that in SCCM console as one object found. Okay, and also if you go up, there is one optional um, optional inventory also. See, you can see that optional attribute also count as one, which we have added as employment type, for example. Okay, it's going to pull that information. So where can I see this information? So you are saying that I'm saying that this has pulled up, but how can I see that? You can check this information under users. So you found here one user, which is administrator, right? This is the only account which is available here, right? So this information is pulled up. If I go to the properties, I can see that this information is pulled up by it is showing, in fact. So we discovered, and similarly we are going to do it for other resources, which is system. So if you look at here under Active Directory devices, there's no there's only one device, in fact, which is SCCM server. Okay, and there's no other devices. We are going to pull up other devices also. To do that, I have to go to the Active Directory discovery, which is system discovery, enable this. So most of the people, in their lab, what they do is they simply take this checkbox and apply OK, and they get an error because if you remember, it always checks for a valid container. Here, for example, here, so valid container, in this case, if you don't point here any of the container, it says there is no container, so I don't discover it. So let's show that path also. So I'm gonna discover everything. So, or I can see from India, I want to discover India, OU, and then recursive, also the discovery security groups also, and polling schedule I'm leaving this time as a default. Okay, now another, I mean, you don't get it in this log because this is about AD user. So similarly, you should have here AD and SYS or sys discovery should be another log should get created. Let's go here, and if I refresh, AD user is still there, but I also should have discovery. If you remember, when I'm trying to refresh, if you just recall, all the time there is something called SMS execution manager. This is the SMS exec and the component manager. These two gets are changing, then immediately the required log is getting generated. You know why? In the background, anything you do on SCCM server, it goes to the execution manager and it gets executed. That specific component gets initiated, and that information, for example, in this case, I configured here the discovery, so discovery related something got triggered here. Okay, then immediately it is triggering that discovery information. So that's how internally it works. Let's open the system discovery. It says that, hey, I found that path as India OU, and inside that, how many of the objects I found this time? 2 objects. Okay, check it. Under devices, earlier only 1. Okay, these are not the devices. I'm going to talk on this in the operating system deployment section. For now, you can ignore these two. These two are gets defaultly created. Okay, and if I refresh, I don't get it because it's not updated. So all I have to do is I have to go to the device collections. You see here the member count is still 3 because the 3 is the one which is this, and other 2 are x86 and x64 unknown computers. Okay, now I'm gonna update this membership, right? Because always the collections will show the old data. Okay, if you want to show the latest data, you have to make the update membership. Okay, right click and update, and this is going to re-evaluate that membership of that collection. Okay, so I'm going to show you that information in a minute. So now this count should change, and also I should be able to see under devices additional machine. See, I got the one other machine now. Also, it's still doing the update cycle. Let's do that. Okay, it's done, in fact. Okay, now if I go to the devices, I should be able to see here the machines. Yeah, only one machine, in fact, because the domain controller is not in that path, right? So if you go to the DC under India, okay, OU, you have computers which are only 2. Okay, one is already discovered, CM01, and now only additional new one is the Windows 10 PC. If you are configuring as this level, okay, so definitely most of the company people they go for the root, okay, root of the domain, so that it discovers everything. And I don't need this OU because I'm gonna put overload because it covers the child also, right? So if I click on apply, and if I want to run it, okay, I have to wait for either for the full cycle of 7 days, or I have to wait for 5 minutes. So I'm gonna say that, okay, now click OK. So this is gonna run now the complete cycle. Okay, now if I want to run full discovery now, that would initiate a discovery process. So in this log, if you can see that now system discovery should run as this path, and this time one more file also gets discovered. Yeah, it's progressing now. See, and all the containers it is searching, and it is pulling the information. It says that now total 3 of them are found. Let's go to the collection and check it. Devices, now still the 4. I'll just update the membership so that I should be able to see the domain controller. Refresh. Yeah, 5 has been updated, right? So now I'm able to see all the 3 computers. Okay, well, now you're getting what I'm trying to explain here. Now let's go back to the administrator console of admin section. In this, we have configured users and the system discovery. Now let's go to the group discovery. Group discovery discovers the information about Active Directory users groups. So let's go to the location. You can actually bind either location based or a direct group based. So you're sure that you want to directly bind to a specific group, you can do that. But in my case, I like to go for the location, because if I give it the top level, all the AD groups will be automatically discovered in the easiest way. So this is for AD groups. Okay, and give that as the name and say polling every 7 days. By default, all of them are 7 days. Okay, apply, and the polling schedule is a 5. That's a default configuration, and if you rerun that, it is running, right? So what could be the log? Can you guess? AD, this one is the AD, the old one would be ADS, sysdis. Right now it should be AD sys, and there should be a G should become, right? And then log should end with a discovery, right? So let's have a look on it, whether the log got created. Yes, you have the G also here in between. Now AD system discovery, S stands for system, G stands for group. So it is pulled up and it found 21 objects total. Okay, so what are those objects? This is one of the object. Okay, like this, all of the objects got found, total 21 objects. Let's open that also. Here I go to collections. Okay, now even the users also showing as one user. Okay, under all collections, also all user groups are not showing. It might take some time, or I have to update the collection membership. Okay, and if I go to the users, I only see the users as well as the groups now, right? Earlier it was only users. Since it has discovered already how many of them, I forgot, 21, right? So total 21 is now able to see. In fact, it should show one more along with the user group, right, with the username as administrator. So it's gonna update in a minute, and it will show all those information. Okay, it's still showing as a 0 because it is still running in the backend. Okay, that might take some time. We'll come and check on that in a minute. Okay, let's continue with the further configuration, which is the forest discovery. If you remember, I tried to come up with the AD fast, and then I also talked about the heartbeat discovery, which will tell that whatever the machine so far discovered, that will send a message, okay, to the SCCM server that, hey, I'm alive, hey, I'm alive, like that information it will send. What if a client is discovered, but from the last 90 days, if the mission is not found once again? Okay, that means you have a schedule of discovery process which is running good, but unfortunately a mission was created for a test and which is not no more. So that means you completed maybe a time period of 90 days, that has to be deleted automatically. That information would be once Heartbeat Discovery finds that information and it says that, hey, you have not reported from last 90 days, let me change your status to absolute. So once it becomes as absolute, that specific device, it gets deleted as part of the maintenance tasks. There's something called maintenance tasks which are also within the SCCM, which will which does the house cleaning basically. Okay, now let's go to the forest discovery. What exactly the forest discovery? Forest discovery has a mechanism which would automatically also creates your boundaries, okay, for you based on the IP subnet. If you remember, we have not done the boundaries based on the IP subnet, right? So if I run, for example, this, if I enable this if I ask that, hey, you have to go and create AD site based boundaries as well as the IP based. If I take these two, I no need to in fact create here the boundaries manually. Earlier in the first step I created manually, right? So if I want to override that option, I simply have to enable here. Here I just want on AD based, or I also want on IP based. If I just click on apply and run it, so what happens is now the same kind of log you need to verify, which is F. It should start with F, right? Component started. Now the log should come, right? So hierarchy manager also started because the logs got changed in the boundary. Okay, now let's go to the so in fact the log also got generated, AD forest discovery log. Okay, and this is already got, and 2 sites got discovered and 2 subnets, right? So let's go to the console and see what happened actually. In the console, if you look at the boundaries, earlier was only red one, now Bangalore also discovered. Also you have a subnet, so which I've given as a 10 series as a subnet in my Active Directory site, that also pulled up. So SCCM is an intelligent way, it has pulled all the required information. If an SCCM admin is lazy to configure, in fact it will populate all the values, but it is not configured for any of the boundaries. If you look at here, the boundary information is under this, right? The boundaries are here, so still you have only one boundary, which is a primary, and the boundaries are these, right? So these are the boundaries got newly created. In fact that's fine, okay, and this is also under our scope, so I'm going to add this also to our site boundary group, which is primary site. Okay, now you understand the boundaries and the discovery. As a first step, you can configure boundaries and then boundary groups and then discovery. If you're configuring from the discovery, yes, Active Directory Forest Discovery will populate for you automatically the discoveries, and then you can create a boundaries out of boundary groups out of that boundaries. Okay, there is no hard and fast rule that you must have to follow only this method. You can do it any of that method. Okay, now you have the required options, right? One is in your console. Now you have the users, okay, also you have the devices also listed. Now what to be done, the next step would be the thing that let's try and find out what to be done as a next. So what we have done so far is we have created a boundary and we assigned this boundary to a boundary group, and we said that boundary group also give the content as well as the policies for these clients, right? That's good. The next step would be for you to finding the objects, which is I said replace, instead of finding, use a word called discovery. So we use the discovery methods, right? So there are users, systems, system group, as well as the forest discovery, right? So we use all of them AD based, okay, not on the network based, okay, right? Because we have AD, you can configure even the network simply adding the subnet information. Now as a next step, what to be done? So you have ready infrastructure, but you don't have anything on these machines. So what what to be there in these machines? There's some other software to be installed on this machine called SCCM Client. So if you install client software, these machines will communicate with your SCCM server. So what happens? You need to have one client software. So which is gonna we are gonna configure that client software in a minute. So installing SCCM Client is an easiest way. However, it has a different options. So one person can use any of the method. Okay, the first method would be installing manually. That means you log into the machine, say example here, and you would install manually. Let me show you that. How would I do? I simply go to the server, which is inhyd-cm01, if I'm correct the computer name. On this machine, if I open the network shares, all these network shares are created by default. It was not done by me, right? So I didn't configure any of the network shares. But if you look at here, these are the payloads or site code with the SMS underscore site code, which is a lab in this case. If I open on this, I have something called client folder. So these are the source of the SCCM client. Okay, but you don't need all of them. Okay, if you have this simple ccm setup.exe file, this gets when you executed this ccm setup.exe, which is used to install SCCM client. Okay, this is the only file will be useful for installing the SCCM client in any of the method. There are different methods, like you can push remotely to the SCCM client on all the machines. Okay, if the requirements are met, saying file and print server is enabled and WMI is working fine, and you have enough space, enough system is compatible with the SCCM client, hardware requirements met, it can install remotely without logging to the each and every machine. Okay, you can do that. I'm going to do that also, and also I'm going to show you the manual method. So the manual method would be in the manual method or in the client push, what happens is it will be used only this file. Okay, what happens is this file gets executed and it will call the required files from here, and it gets downloaded to the target machine automatically, and then it will install the SCCM client. Let's go back to the SCCM server and see are we ready really for SCCM client installations. If you look at here, I have not refreshed the SCCM console. Okay, wantedly you see here the site code was not populated. Okay, and the SCCM client is no here, right? And if the site code is not populated, that indicates something wrong to those machines. Okay, that means the machines are not part of your boundary. In fact, we have configured the boundary, but it is not showing because I haven't refreshed that console yet. Okay, now when I refresh that, okay, I should be able to see as a lab, right, which is my site code for all these three machines. So if it is not showing as the site code here, if you try to install SCCM client, it might fail. 60 to 80% of the chances are there for SCCM client to get failed while installation. Okay, let's refresh this. How would I refresh? Simply go to the here and double click the all systems. It should show me here site code. Right now I have the site code information here. That means my boundaries is these machines are false under my boundary, and I'm ready for client installation. In fact, I can right click and install the client also from here, but not let's not do that. Okay, we would do that as a second client installation method. Before that, let me go to my SCCM client machine. This is my SCCM client, Windows 10 PC, you see here, right? So I'm going to copy this one file, ccm setup.exe, which is an application file. So if you look at the file extension ccm setup.exe, this is the exe which is used, right? So I'm just gonna paste it to my maybe temp folder example. I'll simply paste it here. I like to do it manually because I get a lot of errors, and then I can easily troubleshoot. Okay, now you know, right, SCCM logs to read, you need to have CM trace utility, which is very useful. So I also copy that from my SCCM server, where I copied under D drive, if I'm correct. Yes, This is a file, copy. I'm going back to my machine. Somewhere you can copy, maybe not just to the logs folder or temp folder. You can open up this. So log is there. Okay, now we are ready with the configuration. So to do that, either you can double click it. Okay, in fact, if you double click it, it does the job, but that's not the way. Maybe for the status to do. Okay, right click. Okay, and okay, right click, run as administrator, and point to C:temp wherever you have copied that file. So the file name is ccmsetup.exe, and if I run /? I get lot of command lines which I can use it. See, so these are all of them are the site. This is one of the command line example. I can use it. If you want to uninstall the SCCM client, you need to use /uninstall command. Okay, if you are trying to communicate with some of the management point, you can give as a management point name. For example, you have not extended your schema, then you have to specify manually. Otherwise, since if you look at here on our Active Directory, our systems management container has filled with our MP information, so it can simply, if you see, if I refresh, it is also coming up my boundaries information, right? So boundary range, so it can easily go, okay, I fall into this boundary, and then I can contact with this management point since I have extended the schema, right? And I published the information in Active Directory Systems Management Container. But if you are trying to install an work group or maybe a DMZ zone, then you have to specify /mp, and if you have the complete source locally available, you can use this source path so that it doesn't go and download from the SCCM server. Instead, it uses the local source to install the command. Okay, now let's go and give us the there is another options also, but for now I have not given the other command lines. Sorry, ccm setup.exe and SMS site code. Let me give you SMS site code equal to R2 because I extended schema, so I should be able to give as R2. Otherwise, if it is a work group, you have to say as a lab. The lab is your SCCM server. In this case, if you try to connect, it is coming right here in the top. Also the site code, also you are getting it here, right? So that information you have to give manually. So I'm just gonna give very simple command, not extended. In fact, I'm gonna talk a bigger commands ongoing on this course. Now I just click on next, hit enter. Now what happens is, when I hit enter, in the background what happened is it triggered the exe file. It went to C:\Windows. It created a folder called CCM setup, and it copied that file wherever I'm trying to execute to here, and then also it created a logs folder. In the logs, it's generating a log saying that this command is wrong, okay, at this point of time. Okay, and that's fine. Okay, looking for MP, no valid MP sources found from Active Directory. That's good. So we got an error and we need to find out what went wrong. We can do that, and it is, if you see the same story, what happened is I executed /?, so then only it has created this log file, and it says that from here to here it is copying, like C:\temp to C:\temp CCM setup exe to C:\windows CCM setup folder got copied, and the copying percentage it is showing. Later point it is validating the MP location, so it doesn't find the MP automatically. Then it is trying to execute this command. Okay, as a service. What exactly means by service? If you open your services.msc, there is a service got created. Okay, CCM setup. Okay, you see here this service got created, so it has running with that. If I double click and see, exactly the same command is showing here, right? This is a command which is coming up here. Okay, so this command, it is started. What happens if I just go to the last of the page, and if I start that service, it again triggers the same thing. You see here, if I start, it triggers and it fails because anyway it has a failure within the log. right? So it has failed. If you look at the timestamp is 2544, just now whatever we have started, it has done. So there is a wrong within the command, okay? So definitely SMS site is the wrong one. You have to give a site code, which I wantedly given this. Okay, now let's go to the right code called R2. Now what happens? Still wrong, okay? It's not wrong because the spelling is correct. So if you look at here, it's proceeding further. So where were we have given SMS site code equal to R2. Now what happened? It is trying to set the default thing. If you remember, while installation we set it, our management point to run on a HTTP. HTTP is a protocol name and runs on a port called IT. So that's a port, and if found, it can also go for 443, right? So that's information it is giving, and it is querying. If you see, Active Directory was queried to this boundary name MS SMS roaming boundary range, and it found this value, which is that exactly matching this name, right? So this is how it was written in that template what we have extended with the Active Directory extension, extending with that, and we publish that value. So it is pulling that, sorry, it is pulling into, it is querying to that, and it is verifying a compatible site for LAB. It found as LAB, and the current site name is omnio.local with the domain name, and it found the site code matched as LAB. So now it's gonna install as the LAB with this version. Okay, now it is proceeding further, and it retrieved one management point record from Active Directory site as LAB, right? And forget about this, this is just the common error, is all these. And then it says that I'm gonna put a command now to install, and it's gonna retry every 10 minutes until it gets the install successful. That means if you triggered once, every 10 minutes it try to start this service. By the way, if I just oh, I started like, but I haven't closed, so let me close this, and if I refresh this, it is already started state. In fact, it is already closed. CCM setup.exe also missing, because if I just go down complete, the installation is completed, that's why it's done and it's no more. But let me come back to the what I'm trying to show you in this log file. Before I show anything here, let me open. I'm going to show that anyway for you, but there are some things that are very important before it should open before. Oh my goodness, it's stuck, my mission stuck. Control, which is opening control panel. You can go to the small icon so that I can quickly pick. So this is where it's open and the components are very less. Okay, I'll come back to this why I have opened here. Let's review the same log where we were earlier. So it says that it's trying to find the lab name as SLB, LAB, and then it is connecting with the HTTP, which is that's why one of the pre-requirement is IAS, right? So it is trying to connect to the SMSDP underscore SMS packages, which is the default share of your DP packages, and to this folder. Okay, and it is trying to download to the local folder here, CCM setup. Let's go here and see what happened. So it's downloaded, right? If you remember, we earlier it was only one exe file. It is downloading all the files. That's what this logs. Okay, it will try to connect to this, and it try to download all the required files. See here, Windows Firewall, here policy platform and VC++, everything gets downloaded. Okay, after that, if you remember, as I said, SCCM also uses the WMI, right, extensively. So it is compiling a WMI classes to be created here. If you see here, MOV file is getting compiled, so the WMI class is getting created in the background. Okay, and that itself takes some time. Post to that, it goes to the any of the components which are not required, it gets removed. Okay, see, WMI is getting triggering, registering everything. That's a key. Okay, WMI is the key here, and now everything goes done. And finally, what happened, if you remember here, if you look at here clearly, it's moving or it's removing some of the applications which are unused. Let me show you that. So if you look at here, this is the folder, right? So it puts that client.msi file. So what is that file? Actually, what happens is the SCCM client can be installed with this MSI file. However, you can't directly install it, only used for the self-healing purpose. So if you're trying to reinstall, it doesn't go and download. Instead, it checks for this path, and it simply instead of downloading over the LAN again or over the WAN, it uses the same file and gets installed. Okay, that's why it is keeping here, and post to that sometimes these files also gets removed, or if it is available, that's fine. Now the client got installed, but where is the client installed? You don't get it under control panel. Let's go to the control panel. Programs and features, you don't see here anything other than the VC++, which is installed as part of the log. We can see that, right? So where is that SCCM client? SCCM client doesn't show in your add and remove programs. Okay, where it will show? It will show as this configuration manager under control panel, as well as here as a system center. Go to the Microsoft System Center, you have something called Software Center. What happens is here the Software Center will be available as a interface for you. For example, if you are looking for some applications, or some applications are targeted to this machine, that will be available here. If it is a Windows updates, it will be available here. If it is an operating system upgrade, it will be available here, and the installation status and the compliance status can be viewed here. And this is where you can configure your power management individually for each machine by end user, and can also configure the work hours time. Okay, now I'm gonna close this. Okay, now I'm gonna show you this applet which I've already opened. If you remember, this was opened as soon as it has installed. Okay, so the installation was completed with the exit code 0. What if you're getting here some errors maybe? Okay, like if you look at here, there is another service also getting started, created, called CCM exec. So if you go to the agent in the services manager, and if you refresh, there is some service called SMS agent. Okay, this service got created as per the logs. Okay, and it is starting. Okay, so this service is getting into status CCM exec. Let's open CCM exec. Is not written here, but the display name is SMS agent host, but the exe file is CCM exec. Okay, and it has started as per the log. Okay, now what if you're getting some errors in between, and how do you troubleshoot? For example, this kind of small error was there, but this is not useful for you. As I said earlier, the core of the SCCM client installation anyway is this, but in the internally it is triggering the MSI, which is client.msi, which was copied post installation here. So this will have a log file .client.msi log. Let's go to CCM setup. Under logs, you have client.msi.log file. So this is the size of which would be used for debugging level. So if I open up this, is a huge file. Okay, close to 10 MB of the log has written. Let's open. It's still opening up. It's still opening. So it's open finally. So you see here the returning code is 0, and this is it in detail, what happened, how the processor are triggered. Okay, what all the things has done. If something goes wrong, okay, you will definitely get an information here. So this is very useful log. So what we talked about the client installation, and the client, while installation, as part of the client installation, it also installed the VC++ also, right? And that's a logs are related to, you can find it here, right? So now the client is installed. So client is installed, and we know where we can see. I said Microsoft System Center, this is where you can see, and also you can see under control panel, right? So if I open the control panel, what happened is under general, it shows the client version here. If you want to find out what is the client version, you can find it here. And every SCCM client will have a unique ID which is called GUID. Okay, so this GUID would be generated by client, and that must have to be approved by SCCM server. Okay, this GUID information will be stored automatically while installing the SCCM client under smscfc.ini under C:* Windows smscfc.in. So if you open this configuration file, it is the configuration file which has the unique ID which starts with this. This is the unique ID which is belongs to this machine. So SCCM client will communicate by using this GUID. Okay, so that's another configuration file which I've shown you now. Now that's the same number like 6FFF if you remember, and the components. So these all are the components at the client end. I'm talking about this not the server side components, I'm talking about the client side components. So these components are either installed or maybe disabled or enabled. So there is a difference. So if you say disabled, that means it's not enabled. Say example, remote tools are not enabled. That means remote tools, to take this machine as a remote control, we used this agent which is called a remote tools agent, okay, which is in a disabled state. That means you can't take it. Okay, this or whatever you are able to see as enabled, that means these features are enabled. You can get the information. Say example, software inventory is enabled, hardware inventory is enabled. So this machine hardware inventory can be viewed at SCCM server. Okay, and this client will send the hardware inventory information. Okay, this is about the enable options. Now let's look at the install. Means you have configured as installed, but you have not enabled the feature in SCCM server end. So once you enable at the server side, okay, you will get it here as enabled. So why I'm talking this is I'm going to explain you when I'm trying to configure as the client agents, which is another step under configuration. Okay, like as a first we said about the boundary groups and discovery. The next step would be the client installation, right? So before you install the client, actually you need to configure the client agents. So wherever the whatever the agents you have enabled there, that would appear here as install or enable or disable based on the settings which you enable in the server. So let me show you that also. Maybe you can easily remember if you can check that. This is the client settings. So if you see here default settings which are enabled, okay, I can see here hardware inventory which is enabled as yes, and every 7 days it will collect. Similarly, software inventory also configured here which is enabled. Okay, if I look at the remote control tools which are disabled, you see. So that's what it is talking about at the client end. So you can easily now correlate this with the server so that you can easily remember. Now going back to the actions, in fact I did open this because of this screenshot. Okay, in this at this point of time, this screenshot showing only two, okay, which is mission policy refresh and the user policy refresh. Why and what is the importance of the actions? Actions are client side. If you are forcing a SCCM client to do something, then you come here and you are going to perform that action. Let's say you are looking for software updates and your machine is not getting that software updates as an end user. You want to force it, you can go back here and force it. Okay, as part of your troubleshooting, maybe you wanna pull your hardware inventory to be sent. Here it will come up, but now nothing come, because when we opened during when it is just completed and we just open this. Okay, what happens after this is it looks like this. Okay, and if you look at here site code, it is populating cache information. I'm going to talk on that. Cache is like by default around 5 GB of the free space would demands by SCCM client to allocate as a cache. That means any of the software which are downloading from SCCM server, it will put into a folder called cache folder. Let me show that folder also. So in fact, before going there, where is SCCM client installed physically? Okay, so go to the C colon Windows. There's a folder called CCM. The installation was happened from CCM setup, and the cache is under separate folder called CCM cache, right? There's nothing at this point of time under cache. Okay, so example, after 10 days or maybe 10 application pushed up, you would see here the cache of the download size of 10 different packages. Okay, and coming to CCM folder, this is a folder, this is where the client binaries got installed. So when we triggered ccm setup.exe, okay, this triggered, right? So what happened is this has installed under CCM folder. If you look at it in the log and the top also, it's gonna install under CCM folder. This entire setup is going to install under CCM folder, right? So let's open that folder, see what is inside. So you have a lot of other files, and WMI related, if gets corrupted, you can compile, or SCCM itself will compile that MOV file. And there is also logs folder. Let's have a look on the logs. Okay, so what happened after this is, you look at here, what happened is here, it is starting the service called CCM exec, which is nothing but a SMS agent host. When a service triggers, okay, what is the exe file name? CCM exec. If you remember, try to remember that its name is CCM exec. Okay, where it was written, it says that starting the service. Okay, and now here the CCM exec is getting started, right? So now I go back to the logs. Okay, there's something called CCM exec. Okay, this is the first execution. So that's specific service related task. For example, if I restart this, okay, what happens is, you look at here, it's gonna shutting down because it was shutting down. It is starting now. It's gonna okay, it's starting. So once it is triggered, this is the first component, which is triggers at the client end. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, now once the client is triggered, it's gonna do as a next step for the first time. Okay, this is for the first time. What it does is it goes to the client registration process. So this client, okay, must be registered with a SCCM server, right? So let me open client ID manager. Yeah, this one. Okay, so as soon as this log, okay, if you remember, the setup log is this, right? Yeah, so this is a log, right? So 927. So what happened is 927, after immediately when it is started, it is trying to generate a GUID based on that file, okay, which is smscfg .ini file, which is under C colon Windows. Let me open that once again, smscfg. So this file got generated, right? So this is, with this GUID, it is getting registered in SCCM console. Okay, once this is approved, okay, it has to send information, hey, I have this and kindly approve it. Okay, so it takes some time, and then finally it says approved. Okay, once it is approved, I mean, if it is not approved, you get it here errors. Okay, you can read here, because it's a lengthy, getting as very lengthy. Still, I'm giving you a very in detailed information. Once it is synchronized and fine, then it goes to the approval process. Once the SCCM console, let's go to the SCCM console. What happened is, in the background, once the agent has started that client ID manager, now the client is getting tick mark as yes, the green, and client as yes, and the client activity as yes. Okay, it is active. Okay, now one client got installed. Okay, let's go back here. So now I did wantedly open this one, right? So I'm gonna close this. How did I open this? As soon as the client was installed, I opened from here. I'm gonna do now close, and if I reopen that and go to the same visit, same applet, in fact, you have a different screen altogether, right? So cache is fine. Okay, if you see here, 5 GB was, so these options are populated more. That's what I wanted to show you. So if a client is not working, you would get that error. Okay, you would you don't see here under actions. Okay, that means client is just installed, that's why we got that. Okay, after soon as it is registered with the SCCM server, and then the other components get started and you have a proper client. If it is installed, it will show as this. Okay, so now have a look on it. So here, if you want to refresh the machine policy, you can run that. Okay, so it says that it ran, and you can force the machine to get the hardware inventory. Here you go and collect the hardware inventory. So it will collect the hardware inventory information. So what all we have done is, now if I go back to the machine, how would I see the report of that machine if it is sent the hardware inventory? So you can have actually go and look at the reports will be there, but you don't have any reporting manager, so you need to actually install the reporting manager role, which we are going to do it in the next lab. For now, if you want to view it without the reports, you can always go to the right click and go to the Start and Resource Explorer. So this would show you the hardware inventory information. Okay, in this case, for example, you want to see about install applications. See, you are getting the install applications. Okay, and you want to look at maybe network adapter configuration. You can see it, what's the IP address it is assigned as a default gateway, and the IP 100, and the subnet information. This is the history of the hardware inventory. If you've forced multiple times, okay, you would get it. By this time we forced twice, right? So I should be able to see here in a minute maybe. Okay, it's not yet completed, so I can see here the inventory information and the software inventory. You can see here, that's about the first level of configuration what we have done so far. I'm gonna consolidate it in another video, so that it would be a smaller video if you are already aware of SCCM, but the focus was this video is more detailed for beginners to expert level.